but I think there still needs to be a realization that we are still operating in a budget deficit, and we are balancing our budget by taking budget stabilization funds, which are very quickly becoming depleted, and is not a situation that we can maintain into the future. Just as a recap on the budget needs, per our 2012-2013 budget information that we received, property taxes will decrease 6% due to general decline in property values brought on by the recession and the housing collapse. We're also expecting the 2012-2013 full negative impact of the Sappy plant closure on property tax values. An unusually large number of property tax appeals have been filed in recent years, and many of these are from large taxpayers and will likely have a negative impact on property taxes for several years, and namely the BC Cobb plant, which we had to return about what, almost $1 million? Okay, $950,000, and plus the value of their properties was cut approximately in half, correct? Now that largest taxpayer is slated to close or mothballed on January 1st, 2015. Now, that will require continued major restructuring and downsizing of public services for years to come here. And we continue to expect negative factors to outweigh positive ones for the next few years as far as the budget is concerned. If we look at the impact that this budget was submitted, our full-time complement of employees was 233 positions. In the interim, we have eliminated an entire department and privatized the trade inspections department. By way of comparison, in 2002, the city's overall full-time complement was 315 positions. At that point this past summer, there was elimination of 82 positions. 7 firefighter positions were vacated. We vacated a maintenance worker. We eliminated a finance director's position. Our general fund had been required to transfer $160,000, an increase of $60,000 for the Smart Zone debt service, and the $75,000 contribution from the Community Foundation for Muskegon County will disappear at some point as well. And when is that?
2016.
Thank you.
16.
So that gives you just a general idea of some of the issues that we face when we're looking at the budget and our attempts to maintain core services, namely police, fire, public works, and maintaining the infrastructure that the city is required to maintain. Police is very important. Our complement is down from 91 to about 79. And that doesn't just affect us, but everybody within the region, who's in the metro area. Everybody's having a hard time keeping their heads above water, especially when it comes to public safety. And tragically, the results of that we're seeing this weekend, where multiple departments have to be called in order to protect the public, sharing services due to the fact of many jurisdictions having an inability to maintain a large enough contingent to protect the public. And this sadly, that resulted in the wounding of one of our seasoned officers, and I hope the officer is doing well, and their best wishes to the officer and to the officer's family. So those are the considerations in the cutting of senior transit. And senior transit will not be probably the last program. We will be looking at either this coming budget year or the budget years going into 2015 and beyond. Last summer, when we went through the budget process, we heard 2 nights of testimony or testimonials from individuals about the importance of the program to them, and we appreciate that. At that time, the program could have been eliminated because there was support enough for it. However, the former mayor at that point, in order to engage the citizens, made a suggestion that a ballot proposal be put on the November 2012 elections to see if there was support to float a portion of a mill in order to maintain the program. And he was adamant at that time that if it failed, the program would end. And at that time, he also challenged the proponents of the program to make good on their commitment and go out and campaign for the ballot proposal. So that kind of brings us up to date where we are now. The ballot proposal failed. I know there's some contention that it was confusing, although the ballot language did include in the proposal for the mill that you have to vote for the one underneath this too. So we do rely on an informed electorate, and that means in a Hamiltonian manner that the electorate educates themselves on the matter before them. So that brings us where we are now. And I will let Commissioner Turnquist start.
What is the proper procedure to vote on this issue at tomorrow night's commission meeting? Is there a motion to take it off the table and present it? I mean, you've given a lot of reasons of the downside. We approved the budget 2012, 2013 of X amount of dollars, 24 million something or other, and included in that was taking almost 5 million, or no, not 5 million, but 500,000 out of the general fund and coverings make up the difference between our expected income and that. We received a very good report from Mr. Paul, and we will be less than taking 300,000 out of that for the fiscal year. I just would like to see us vote on this. Sometimes you got to do the right thing, and rather than put up all the numbers and say this is $30,000 for the remainder of the year is like 1/100th of a percent of our budget. It's nothing. And all those things you said that we're going to lose, I just don't agree with that.
Well, you're entitled to your own opinions, but
you're entitled to yours.
But I'm going on, you know, facts on what's actually in the checkbook and what we are facing. Now, if yes.
Unless there's additional comment, I'm going to let
Okay, but one thing I did want to, you know, ask though, so if we did proceed and fund this to the end of the fiscal year, the program would end June 30th.
Here's my thing. As I've listened to people describe their use of this program over the course of the last year, I'm struck again and again by the number of individuals who describe services being provided by our drivers that they're not actually supposed to do. And actually, by doing so, are exposing to the city to significant liability if it went bad. Now, people may poo-poo that, but I can't govern based on what my gut tells me. I have to use my head, and I have to be responsible. Because, quite frankly, anybody who thinks these things are, well, let's just do the right thing, we have an example right next door in the form of Muskegon Heights Public Schools, what happens when you don't make tough decisions? Eventually, you go over a financial cliff. And we're not in that position because over the last decade, we have made some very unpleasant and in some cases extremely difficult decisions to preserve core services and eliminate entire departments and programs that were extremely popular and extremely important, but they were not a core municipal service. So I do think that we can't just ignore that reality. And we certainly can't afford to take financial risks with our staff doing things that our insurance is not going to cover because that's not within their work scope. So, having looked at that and listened to those services, a lot of what we're hearing described is not a transportation service. It's actually a form of home health aid service, of which there are programs available through federal funding, locally available to provide that level of assistance so seniors can stay independent and stay in their home. And the reason for that is Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security have learned that it's much less expensive to pay pennies up front to help seniors stay in their home and stay independent than for them to lose those options and end up in long-term care, which is the single most expensive option. And quite frankly, often leads to a much shorter life expectancy for the person involved. So, one, I think we need to look beyond just a transportation program. The second thing is just spending $30,000. And, you know, I haven't worked in a job where making a lot of money has been important to me. That's never been my priority. So from my perspective, $30,000 is a lot of money. That's not inconsequential. That's a lot of money. That's half a police officer. And so I don't take those kind of decisions lightly. So if we just do nothing and extend this program, and then it drops off later on, we've spent money and accomplished what? You know, I don't see the benefit of that. So I think if we're serious about providing a transportation service, we have some options before us. We can modify the existing program so that it's more self-supporting and that our general fund expenditures are reduced based on our financial reality as outlined very well by the mayor. We could potentially take another run at finding local partners who, for a reduced cost from our general fund, might be willing to provide an enhanced service to our existing seniors. And keep in mind, we're talking about approximately 160 individuals. You know, when we're looking for the amount of money we spend for the number of individuals being served, obviously if you're one of those 160 individuals, that's very important to you. But in the city of 40,000, we have to be mindful that the other 40,000 people have things that are important to them as well. So if we can find a partner where these services could be at least partly replaced at a reduced cost, I think it might be worth taking another look at that. So I'm not opposed to maintaining some sort of program necessarily, but I do think that just saying we're going to fund it as it is for another arbitrary period of time is just kicking the can down the road. And I think the public deserves better from us than that. So, you know, those are my ideas, is that either we just are honest with people and say we just don't have the money to continue to do this, we direct staff to negotiate with a potential partner, or we look at changing the fee structure and the other structure as far as time and availability and those things, so that this is more of a self-supporting program. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Question, what was the last fee that was raised for this service?
Yeah, and starting in July 1st, we raised the one-way fee from $1.50 to $3.
And how far does that far as how far can they go on their $3 one-way ride?
I can tell you.
Again, the boundaries
The
of the
boundaries,
service
okay.
are the city limits to the north and west, Seminole to the south, and Sheridan to the east.
I did suggest last couple meetings that we needed to look at other options for providing the service on a long-term basis. It's been made clear that there are many residents who are in need of a service that picks them up from their home because they are mostly independent and gets them to where they want to be, which may not be a medical appointment. Even if you just want to get to where they'd like to go and have some assistance in getting there. And so I did make as many phone calls as I was able to try to see if there was someone who's already providing that service, and maybe we just hadn't connected people with them. I did locate a local transportation company based here downtown, Total Care Transportation. I did ask them before discussing the matter, what services do you provide? How much notice do you need? They told me they only need 24 hours notice before they schedule a ride. They told me that their standard regular price is for a round trip ride, $30. And that is much higher than what we are currently offering our residents. I did ask them if someone needs help getting in and out of the vehicle, do you provide them with that service? Which they said certainly, because they normally also provide wheelchair transportation. So they're used to providing that service. That is part of what they do. They take people to non-medical appointments. So after that part of the conversation, I asked her, I said, well, we're looking at what our options could be to serve the city residents. And without much prompting at all, they replied with an email that they were willing to cut that price for the city and Muskegon residents in half. So at this point in time, they have made publicly available within a 10-mile round trip, so it would pretty much fall within our city boundaries, that you can get a ride through this agency, this company, for $18. Now that is still much more than what our residents are currently paying, and they're clearly low-income seniors who are using our service because it helps them with their budget. But my question is whether it might be possible, as this company has clearly offered, very quickly and without hesitation, the desire to serve citizens more than they are already doing so. If there's something we might be able to provide that can help us get closer where we want to be and not be under the obligation of providing that service. And here's why I don't think that it makes sense in the long term right now for us to provide that service, is because I think our purpose as municipal government is to provide for public safety, it is to provide for our infrastructure, and it is to help our citizens obtain a diverse economy that is sustainable. And so it's clearly important, these social services for our residents, but I'm not sure that we are the body that should be providing those social services. However, I do think that it is in our best interest and theirs to try to put our residents together with those services whenever possible. And so I'm wondering if there are any thoughts on perhaps providing some type of funding to allow them to provide that service for a cheaper cost.
No, it's one way, so she did 18 round trip, so 6 round trip, 3 times.
Just trying to get that in my head.
And I have not made that specific agreement with them. I've not said, how much money would it cost you to reduce that. That was where I got at the point in the conversation. So that would be something that I think maybe city staff could determine that company, but I don't know if there's any interest to do that.
Question, Mayor. Looking at the transit program that we're looking at now, and that's on the table, are there any other options that we looked at that we possibly may be cutting? And if we do cut this program, how would those dollars that would have been used here be allocated elsewhere? Where would they be allocated?
Well, we had gone through that entire process during the budget period, Commissioner.
Okay.
And we had all unanimously, approved the cutting of the $45,000 from the CDBG. it's like, yeah, we can cut it from somewhere, but as it was stated during this budget process, is that somewhere is, if you want me to line up, 3 or 4 city employees, which one you want to pick? And, the then mayor at that point was as succinct and was that, brash in his illustration as well. Because that's where it's at. We have departments that are shadows of themselves. We just eliminated a department.
Which was not in that budget also, right?
Right, but again, it's helping us tread water, but we're certainly not, bringing stuff into the coffers. Again, we have a balanced budget, but we're using our piggy bank to close the gap.
Well, it's balanced if you think that having over $200,000 in negative cash flow is balanced.
Right.
The fact is that we have negative cash flow, and any business that operates with negative cash flow eventually goes belly up. And so we have money in the bank to allow us to operate with negative cash flow in the short term. Adding to that, in my mind, is irresponsible. So, I think that's, unpleasant as it may be, is our harsh reality, and has been for some time. I think if we decide to move forward, that we've heard there might be a possibility here of partnering, as we did with many of our leisure services programs, that if we move in that direction, then we should make a motion and direct city staff to make that contact to see if that is a possibility and what that might cost, and bring it back to us in a, we'd have to, given the holidays, they have to have a reasonable period of time to get back to us, to see if that's a possibility. But I think quite honestly, if we're gonna sustain this over the longer term, that may be the way to go. And that way we have a fixed cost for this. I don't know about the rest of you, I just heard that at best case scenario, we might end up paying $150,000 in legal fees we don't have in our budget either. So,
City manager, yes.
Well, and maybe I can say a couple things, and hopefully it will clear up what Commissioner German was asking. In terms of the money for the senior transit program, I think you were asking if the program didn't continue, where would the money that was allocated for it go? There was not money allocated for the program from now until the end of the fiscal year. And so, you don't have to worry about where that money would go, because there isn't any. The other thing that I would say in terms of, partnering with somebody else, we did have some conversations with other agencies, but they were nonprofit, not a for-profit company like Total Care Transportation. So we did not have that conversation. But what I would say is, whoever we look to partner with, I think it comes down to money. And, it's a matter of, if we're going to partner with somebody and there's going to be additional rides, then there's going to be additional costs, and somebody needs to bear those costs. The question comes, if we're going to continue to participate financially in some way, then why wouldn't we just run our own program? Unless we can reduce our costs in some significant way. Their program sounds like it's significantly different than ours.
I think the other thing you have to determine too is that even if we were supplementing under a contract with a partner, where would those monies come from? A substantial amount had come out of community block development grants, but we've gone from about $1.5 million when I first came on the commission down to $800,000, and those keep on disappearing.
they're gonna sequester right off the fiscal.
And they're gonna sequester right off the fiscal cliff. And as far as, out of our
It's on the
general
table.
fund, it's not doable. Now, the other thing you have to keep in mind too, commissioners, is that this week in Lansing, the Senate and the House have gone ahead with the elimination of the personal property tax without
No,
without replacing the 20%. Supposedly, we'll be made whole by 80, but there's no guarantee of 20. The manager and I, last Monday, attended a governor's meeting in Lansing with other urban mayors and managers, and Lieutenant Governor Cayley was there, and he was hoping to slow down the process, but that didn't happen at all, and could not give us much comfort in his prognostications. So right now for municipalities, it's a big, bad, scary world, and there's some that are in scarier positions than we are, to the point where they're saying, why the heck doesn't the government just, Lansing just let us, unify with the county so that we can just get out of the business of being a city?
Well, part of the other portion of my reasoning thus far is that the other part of this is we're looking at a supplemental program, a program that's in addition to what those core services are. And in my mind, there have been many opportunities to do other supplemental programming that involves our core services. So for instance, home rehabilitation has had to have been cut. And our core services involve keeping our citizens in a city with homes and developing the land that we have in a sustainable manner. And it's not to say that I don't think that senior transit is important, but what I think is that the funds that we have, when we have them available in supplement, they need to supplement our core services. And it also comes down to fire prevention, public safety, services that help reduce our crime rate. And so I'm just not sure that we're going to get the benefits that we're looking for towards our core services with this program. It doesn't mean that the service doesn't need to be provided, but I'm not sure that it was.
Thank you. Again, last year when it was submitted for elimination, there was a sheet of options, presented, and staff had vetted these agencies. By the testimonials that we've heard, of course, they were not as convenient as ours. The Vice Mayor did point out, again, that one of the issues is that part of the convenience was our employees working outside of their work rules, which, it's a risk for them, it's a risk for the rider, it's a risk for the citizenry. Commissioner Turnquist, you were of a mind to make a motion tomorrow, I believe, correct?
A motion would be appropriate tomorrow evening?
That's, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Item 3, closure of Beach Street during the winter months.
I laid out for you in a, part of my update last week that we've had on a number of occasions, this isn't anything new, but with our dwindling resources, we're trying to be more efficient. We are finding ourselves closing a section of B Street more and more because of the blowing sand between Beecher Park and Lakeshore Drive, particularly closest to the water filtration plant. And we have closed that area on a number of occasions for sometimes prolonged periods of time because of the sand, the fact that we just can't keep it open. And so we've had some discussion about the possibility of just simply closing that section during the winter months. But we wanted to have some discussion with the city commission about that possibility and see what your thoughts and reaction were before we proceed with anything along those lines.
Well, why don't we start with our resident beachcomber?
Haven't we done that before, though, in the winter?
Well, we close it, and you know, on occasion, and, you know, a lot of times it's on overtime or on weekends, and so it costs us money, but we have closed that section for, I say prolonged periods of time, but not,
Not
you know,
months.
not the whole winter or a month or two, that I can remember.
I don't know why, but what months are we,
Well,
proposing?
we would, I would think we'd probably close it now, and then reopen it, as soon as the weather, breaks.
December 1
Probably
through March 30?
in March sometime.
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Would it remain open to the water filtration so the employees can get to that far?
They don't go that way.
It would.
They don't go that way.
And how much money are we gonna save by doing this?
I don't know, probably enough to fund senior transit, no, I'm. It really comes out of another fund, but, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be, it's hard to say how much it saves us. You know, if we close the street during regular work hours, then, you know, we're using existing staff time. Most of the time, quite frankly, it's after hours or it's during, the weekend, so we're paying overtime and that. And then again, it depends on how often we close it and reopen it, so it's kinda hard to say. Mo, could you give a guess about, how much it costs each time, just I guess each time, we close it and have to reopen?
I probably, first of all, if I may, it would not fund senior transit because it's major streets.
I
It's a street fund, so we can't do
I
that.
corrected myself.
But we probably average about, I know you don't, you never did anyway, so. But we probably average about 5 hours a week during those months. So you're talking probably 20 hours of overtime, roughly, depending on how the wind blows.
And we're not just talking snow, we're talking the sand.
Sand is the biggest problem.
Sand is the big issue.
Sand is the biggest problem for us from a safety, aside from even, you know, aside from the cost itself, but you still have the safety issues around those curves.
Are we discussing the entire, closure of the entire East Street from Dune to Lake Shore, or just the portion in front of the water filtration?
No, the portion in front of the water filtration plant, all the way around to Beechwood Park. So about to Dune Street.
Here's a concern I have with that. Clearly you can get to Pier Marquette Park from, you know, if you continue on East Street. However, a lot of people, and myself included, there's not a whole lot to do in the winter around here. And to be honest, for many people, there's not a whole lot to do in the winter. And one of the few things they do is drive out and look at the lake. They might not get out and play in it, but they do drive out and look at it. And I'm worried from a local and a tourism perspective that we are cutting off a very big viewshed of one of our major resorts.
But they still go.
Do you want,
If I may, I mean, the parking lot itself will stay open. The parking lot at Peach Street and Lake Shore Drive, access to it, we'll have to keep it open, if nothing else, for access to the filtration plant employees. So that gives you the most of, I guess, the parking spaces are available. We'll make sure that those are available for that tourism. And then we're gonna have some signs saying the road the road closed ahead, that will send people down to Lake Shore Drive coming out.
both parking lots at Beechwood Park will remain open as well for people to walk on the boardwalk.
And that's really the most activity generating facility out there is the Beechwood Park because of the, the slides and the fire pits and stuff like that.
And so the boardwalk would remain open
Oh, yes,
along
boardwalk,
those
yes.
It's just the traffic access because of the impediments with the sand. Vice Mayor?
My concern, I mean, I certainly understand, because it's closed practically every other week as it is, and, I can understand just closing it and not dealing with it until the spring when you start taking the snow fences up. But my concern would be, I mean, unless I'm wrong, my understanding has always been if we lost Beach Street for whatever reason, we'd never be able to put it back in. Do we endanger endanger that at all by closing it off seasonally?
If anything, I think we would be prolonging its life because of the less use, if you will, during the,
Well, I'm talking about if it gets to the point where it's completely buried by the end of the season, would that raise even the possibility that we wouldn't be allowed to dig it back out and reuse it?
No, Mo will issue
we
you a
will-
shovel and out you go.
We're not creating a dune that we have to.
That's my concern.
no, we will not let it get to that point where it becomes a nightmare to open it up in the spring, even if we have to get in there in the interim and kind of reduce the amount of sand collected on it or accumulating on top of the surface. We'll have to do it even though the road might be closed, if you approve that, obviously.
What he's saying is the benefit of that would be they could do it at their leisure, during their day hours, as opposed to having to keep the road open and go on travel.
Without much interruption, if you will. Nowadays, what we're doing is we're sending out the notices to the Chronicle and Facebook and different places, hey, the road is closed tomorrow because of the high wind and high winds and we can't keep up with it. Well, that sense, you know, everybody gets used to it, that it's closed and we'll open it up as well.
What if it's 75 in February?
If you can sign off, that it will be 75, so we'll keep it open.
I mean, not unlikely. I went for a 24-mile bike ride in February last year because it was almost 70.
We'll keep the bike lane open. That's for
And as
sure.
I told the Vice Mayor, Mo will issue you a shovel.
So, would we anticipate any kind of reaction to the use of the dog beach? I don't know how many people go down there in the winter months, it's probably just a handful, I would think, but,
I can still.
I think with
They'll
the-
get to it.
I think with the ability to park at Beechwood Park, that would take away this thing of if somebody wants to walk the dogs, they can park at Beechwood Park, which is probably 400 feet, 500 feet.
That's not the designated dog beach, but, people are allowed to have their dogs on the beach during those winter months. But that area is not the designated dog beach.
One of the things people lose sight of with our beach is that dogs are banned from a part of it, basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day. It's all dog beach the rest of the time.
right.
You just gotta clean up after
Yes,
yourself.
please. Thank you, Mo. So what do you need from us regarding this? A head nod, do you need anything official, a show of hands?
Not necessarily official, but if there was some real concerns about it, we would do it. If you're okay with it, then we're likely to go ahead with it.
I'd say, give it a whirl and see how it works out for this season. Commissioners? Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other business? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think I owe all of you an explanation. There's been a couple of news stories, or more than a couple. And so I just want to kind of apprise you with what I've done, going to the jail selection committee the last 2 Thursdays. I was participant, I know some of you participated in the public charrette process over the course of this year. There were 88 different sites that were reviewed, including McLaughlin School. My understanding from the people who've been directly involved in that process, and I've kept in touch with a number of them, were that they had basically settled on the Roundy's building for the new location for the jail, and then at kind of the 11th hour, the judges said, wait a minute, the jail has to be connected to the courthouse for whatever reasons they felt that was important to them. It started coming out the end of October, beginning of November, that suddenly 2 options that were not included in the public charrette process at all were suddenly on the table for discussion. One of them being building a new facility attached to the existing jail, which had not been discussed at any point along the way. And then the second one was the use of Craig School, which is on the corner of Park and Forest, but includes that entire block. I was very concerned about that. I've talked to members of the committee about that. I know most of them. And I was hoping that we would not have gotten to the point that we were. It came to my attention that the agenda for their meeting on November 29th was that their consulting firm was going to make their final recommendation. Well, when you get to the final recommendation, I think that's at the point you gotta make sure that if you're not comfortable with that recommendation, you speak out. And that final recommendation was to build a basically new jail facility on the Pine Street right-of-way between Amity and Walton. And in the schematic that they showed, it showed a single corridor connecting what is essentially a standalone building to the existing jail building. The other final recommendation was the use of the Craig School property for the new juvenile transition center. Now, in that presentation, they indicated that the building is in rough shape. Apparently, gymnasiums are the end-all and be-all for this process, because despite their desire for that site, they indicated that they would have to build an entirely new wing to the building for detention purposes. So that's after talking with the mayor and the manager. I was kind of hoping that the mayor would be there. My neighborhood association president had contacted me as well, William Parker, who is the Nelson Neighborhood Improvement Association president. But given that the meeting was at 1:30 in the afternoon, and there was extremely short notice on what the agenda was, it was not really possible for many of my neighbors to get the day off of work and be able to go and speak out. Mr. Parker was able to attend, and I was able to attend. And so I indicated that based on discussions with the mayor and the manager, and the fact that this is the first time there was availability for public discussion on this topic, that I was speaking on behalf of the city of Muskegon as vice mayor. That wasn't any more than talking after consulting with the mayor and the manager. But that closing off Pine Street was inconsistent with what we've been doing for the last decade or so in economic redevelopment, as far as reopening the street grid, creating a healthy traffic pattern for downtown, because that's how we, the research has shown that that's what we need to do in order to reestablish the economic vitality of our core downtown area. So this really would have been a big step backward. And then when you look at the importance of Pine Street as our original main street, and the fact that there are a significant number of businesses on there, starting at Apple, going all the way to Western, and not only existing businesses that pay property taxes and income taxes, but also some attractive commercial properties that hopefully will be occupied in the near future and bring additional tax revenue into the community and additional economic activity in the community. But closing off the streets like having a heart attack. It just takes one little blockage in one little part of the artery, and everything after that is in trouble. And you can survive that, but you get enough of that, the person dies. And we kind of had that near-death experience about a decade ago. So I expressed to them that as a standalone building, that this could be a compromise situation where they either elevated that single corridor or built it as a tunnel, and that if they felt that they needed additional parking because this would take up more of their parking lot, that we certainly could work with them from a planning perspective to look at that area on the north side of Walton or the south side of Amity for additional satellite parking if needed. I drive on Spring Street on a regular basis, and I can tell you the eastern third of that parking lot's usually empty. So I don't think it's a given that they would actually need additional satellite parking. I said, on the other hand, with Craig School, that is completely for the same reasons that McLaughlin School were inappropriate. Any kind of facility that brings traffic and noise, because you're going to have the dumpsters being empty at 6 a.m., because that's where they do all the other commercial buildings You have people coming to visit, you have the employees coming and going, you have all of that. And there are single-family homes on all four sides of that property. And it's not necessarily that it's not in the city, it's just, I don't care what city you're in, that's an inappropriate location for that kind of activity. And the fact is that the school can go there, because schools can build wherever they want, regardless of zoning. There's no local way to veto that. But when the school leaves, then the underlying zoning reverts, and we have the final say, and that is zoned single-family residential. And there's a lot of hardworking people who live adjacent to that property and nearby who've invested in their homes and look to us to protect their investment. So that's why I spoke out. I can tell you that I spoke privately with most of the elected officials involved in this process over the course of those 2 weeks, because I did go back on December 6th and speak out again a little more bluntly. And some of the county staff involved, and I do get the sense that there is a willingness to compromise on this issue. My assertion to them is that we need to sit down as the city and county and work these issues out, because if they go down the path that their final recommendations included, and, you know, we say no, that's a lot of tax dollars wasted, and that's not in anybody's best interest. And that doesn't mean we're opposed to a new jail or a new youth home, but these were options that nobody had an opportunity to comment on before. So I just appreciate you allowing me to explain why I went to that. It was more a matter of short notice and availability, and why I said what I said. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or either now or after the meeting. And like I said, I know most of the people involved on this committee, and I do think that there seems to be a willingness to be flexible on these issues, and hopefully we can get a positive outcome for our downtown redevelopment out of this. So, thank you for allowing me to offer that explanation here.
That's all right, Vice Mayor. Question?
Two, not really a question for him, two other things. Many of us were invited, probably all of us, to the Burnside Neighborhood Association regarding some tree issues. I know that you were there, and I was also here, so I
And
didn't know if you
Commissioner
had a chance
Turnquist.
to kind of update us on that while we're at it. And have the opportunity to attend.
Hey, Mo.
Yeah, because he's still here, so.
We had the meeting, it was the 28th of November, and it was very well attended, if I recall correctly. I think we had probably over, would you say 25, 30? At least 30 people. It went very well. The conclusion that we came to, as I understand it, is that the width of the street was gonna be, curb and go, but the width of it is going to be 31 back to back, and the estimated number of trees that would have to be removed is probably between 15 and 20 trees, is what we had discussed at the meeting. Granted that the actual design has not been completed yet, so an exact number of trees to be removed is not known yet. The issue or the concern was over the oak wilt disease. What I was able to do before the meeting, I think, came up with a study by the U.S. Department of Agriculture that showed there's some ways that you can deal with potentially diseased oak wilt trees by removing them deep and using some what they call, I guess, tree paint. And I believe we left the meeting with those consensus that the project was not gonna be designed or bid probably until maybe February, March, and construction would start on probably April, and completed before the end of June. I also did commit that we would replant a bunch of trees or plant a bunch of trees at the conclusion of the project, that the city would go out there and plant some trees. Did I miss anything?
So the resolution to the concerns of the oak wilt was that you're going to dig deeper when you remove them, and that you were going to paint the base of it, is that the white paint?
The surface where we cut them out,
Okay,
where
so
we
you're
cut the stump.
painting the ground.
If we remove them after April 1st, April 15th, which is the deadline established. Now, if we're lucky and we can finish the design before, and we can bid the project and find out if it is within the budgeted amount, and we have a contractor on board before April 15th, we might be able to have that contractor go out there